Please welcome to the stage Eric Adams, Mayor, City of New York.
Thank you so much, and to my fellow mayors that are here as well. This engaging conversation. Welcome to the city. We only have one request of you, and that is spend money, spend a lot of money. I was reading the board as I was sitting here, and the answer, I believe, to the question is the last comment. The refugee crises, I see it as refugee opportunities. And oftentimes, it's about how do we look at the problems that are facing us. Yesterday, I was at one of the events, and I shared, my days of, my family's from Alabama, and, we have a large farm there. We're over 100 acres, and from time to time, I would go down and, play the farmer, getting out of the city environment. And while I was there one day, the tractor broke down that we moved hay from one side of the farm to the next. And I connected a motorcycle to the wagon and drove it over to the other part of the farm. Why is that important? I learned that from Cambodia. They don't have a lot of cars. They use something called tuk-tuk. And I was able to solve a problem because I was able to take the cultural norm of another place on the globe and see how do I use it to identify a problem that's here. In order to solve global problems, we must have global tables. If the people sitting around the table to solve the problems of the future all look the same, talk the same, went to the same schools, speak the same language, eat the same food, do the same things, then you're going to have a local solution, and it's not going to impact the global problem. Our refugees that are now coming to our cities from all across the globe, 50% of the population are living in cities. Those refugees, asylum seekers, migrants, they're going to bring something to our cities. And the answers to the questions clearly lies in the cities. Cities have to deal with the national problem. I walked down the hall today. Someone is not going to stop a president and tell him about the failure of garbage pickup. They're going to talk to the mayor. We are closest to the problem, and we're closest to the solutions. But the solutions must come from a diverse environment. Take a recognition of running this event today. Not only listen to the speakers, but turn on your observation cap. Look at who's serving us. Many of them are first and second generation New Yorkers coming from somewhere. Walk into your hospitals during COVID. Look at who took care of every New Yorker. Overwhelmingly, our nurses and our doctors, many of them are foreign born, but came here and stated they want to participate in the American dream and experience. Look at who served your Uber Eats in your cities. Listen to their dialect and their language. Acknowledge them not only for the delivery of what you ask for, but acknowledge them to see the diversity of who they are. Walk into your restaurants and peek inside the kitchen. Look at your face of your waiter. That's where we are. You extract the refugees, the immigrant population, the migrants, asylum seekers, you extract them from our cities, and you will find out our cities will collapse. It's not so much they need us. We need them. We need them. And in the midst of COVID, when third, fourth, fifth generation New Yorkers were remotely working, first generation, undocumented, recently arrivals were not home social distancing. They were making sure that you can social distance. And so when people say to them, our new arrivals, our brothers and sisters from across the globe, no matter which city in America, we've all came from somewhere. I know it's hard to believe. We've all did. And so whenever someone say, go back to your country, they should say, we will when you go back to yours. So as we embrace this dialogue, as we talk about the opportunities is right in front of us. The opportunity is being inclusive. That is why New York City is embracing our brothers and sisters that are coming from parts of the country to participate in the American dream. And that is why if you're from another country, embrace those who are bringing their ideas. Cities and countries will be left behind if they are not embracing the ideas of the new cultures that will sit around the table and participate in dealing with these international and global problems. COVID was a wake-up call for us. The globe came together and said, how do we find a vaccine? And because of that global participation, we were able to save lives. We were able to find answers. So the COVID of housing, the COVID of ending sex trafficking, the COVID of ending homelessness, the COVID of ending inequalities in healthcare, the COVID of ending how we treat our women across the globe, the COVID crisis that we're facing, just as we came together to find a medical solution, we could come together and find a global solution of those problems that are facing us, from climate to the climate that we bring in the room on how we treat each other. I'm excited about where we're going. I'm excited about what we're doing, and the answer lies in the end of the sentence, our refugees. Thank you very much.
Welcome to the stage, Roman Mars of 99% Invisible.
Hello, everyone. Is this on? Thank you, Mary Adams. That was brilliant. 99% Invisible is a show about design and cities and how things are the way they are. And that's what we're going to be talking about today. So our first panel is going to talk about the role of sort of cities and infrastructure. So I'd like to invite our panelists up, Antonio Vitorino and Majora Carter. Thanks for being here. So first I wanted to sort of introduce you. Antonio Vitorino is Director General of the International Organization for Migration, and Majora Carter is the CEO of the Majora Carter Group. Thanks for being here. Pleasure. My first question goes to you, Director General. Migration is driving much of the increase in urbanization around the globe, with nearly 1 in 5 migrants ending up in the world's top 20 most populous cities. So how is migration shaping cities, and why is it important to look at migration at the city level and not just at the national level?
First of all, thank you for the invitation. I think that migrants are just following a global trend. Mayor Eric Adams has just recalled us that worldwide, more than half of the population lives in cities. And that is also happening with migrants, and I would say each time more and more. Because if you look to the data of 2023, you will see that 23.7 million people all over the world have been induced to displacement because of climate change. Mm-hmm. And sometimes this is not very visible, but in fact, we can discuss the reduction of emissions on 2030, 2040, 2050. That's fine. But we forget sometimes that nowadays, today, there are already people who in their daily lives are severely impacted by climate change, and they have to move because of climate change. My second remark is about a paradox. You know, in migration policy, the decisions are taken at national level. Who is admitted? How many? For how long? But then when it comes to integration and inclusion, the decisions have to be taken at local level. Because those are the local authorities that know best what are the needs, not just of migrants that are arriving, but also of the host communities. And you need to plan for the host communities to be able to cope with those new arrivals. Extra pressure on social services, definitely. And in very critical areas like housing, that's the first approach. Secondly, access to health care. And thirdly, access to education. Those are critical elements. And this reminds me, and Mayor Adams spoke about that, what we have seen in the pandemic. Only 56% of the countries worldwide have granted access to health care, including testing and vaccination to migrants, irrespective of their legal status. And in fact, in several countries, undocumented migrants did not have access to health care. What happened? Well, in many of those countries, the local authorities had to jump in because they were the ones who realized that if migrants had no access to health care, they would be a source of spreading the virus, which is very reasonable and rational. But in fact, irrespective of what the legal framework said, they just had to solve a very, very concrete problems. Just to conclude, you have asked me for examples. Well, I could give you tens of examples, but I will say just 3 or 4 of by heart. First, in Brazil, we have a platform called Migracidades. It's a platform that gives advice to migrants about access to the labor market, and this is crucial. Understanding, having information, and being supported to access to labor market, because those people who are coming, they want to work. They do not want to benefit for social benefits, they want to work. In Senegal, for instance, we deal with local authorities to address one of the challenges. If you speak about migration, you have national aggregated data. You know how many migrants live in the United States. That's not enough. You need to know the profile of the migrants in your specific local territory. And that's what we do in Senegal. Identify the profile of the migrants and their needs. And last but not least, since 2018, we have deployed what we called migrants governance indicators. A set of indicators that reproduce good practices in managing migration at local level. And currently, I'm proud to say that 50 cities around the world are already implementing these migrant indicators to improve the management. So, in a nutshell, local authorities, cities, need to have a seat at the table. They need to be heard, and they need to participate at national level, at regional level, but also at global level, because they are the first responders to migratory flows.
Yeah, thank you so much. Majora Carter, you're from New York City.
I am.
And so New York City has historically been a place of immigrants and new people coming in. And it is sort of a big part of the identity of New York City.
Yes.
But there are times in which that inclusion is a paramount of importance, and sometimes inclusion fails. What does it look like when inclusion fails in a city?
Yeah. Well, it's interesting because my parents are refugees of sorts, internally displaced people. They were fleeing domestic terrorism from South Carolina and Georgia during the Jim Crow era, and lynching was a problem. And they ended up in places where entire black businesses were just burned down, people lynching, the whole shebang. And my father left looking for his great American dream, just like everybody else. And so, so to really feel the fact that New York City was that space where you could pursue that American dream and be a part of it. And it did gave our family a real sense of stability, even though it wasn't a great ride because, of course, historic inequities, discrimination, systemic racism was all here. But in the cities where I work, including this one, housing policies are responsible for some of a lot of the social inequality that refugees and immigrants will face when they get here, because we go to those same neighborhoods. I'm from the South Bronx in New York City, and those are the places, those what we consider low status communities, where inequality is assumed, and that's where people end up, especially immigrants, whether they're internally displaced or coming from someplace else. And inequality is assumed, and you see it in the health outcomes, the educational attainment, and low birth rate, and less access to capital, and even the way that, quite frankly, government services, including policing, looks at those communities and how they're treated. And so when we look at all that, we get a sense that we're not creating opportunities for many folks, or certainly not making it easier, whether they're internally displaced or not. We're not making it easier for folks to come to these communities, in part because of the housing crisis that exists in these places beforehand, and that where poverty is concentrated. And so, since we know that the current housing advocacy trends tend to concentrate poverty and all that's problematic associated with it, health outcomes, educational attainment, incarceration, and of course poverty, we do it through subsidized rental housing, which there's a big market in that a lot of folks do, a lot of developers do very well benefiting from it, but there's no opportunities or very little opportunities, at least from the advocacy or the government side, to really support the folks that are in those communities to actually engage in home ownership, property development, and also even entrepreneurship, which we know is a really important tool to use to get people, into a much more stable space. And those kind of things are much harder to find. And I think that's the way inclusion or lack of inclusion manifests itself. Mm-hmm. It's like we're concentrated in areas where poverty is considered like part of the status quo, and that's what we see. So I think one of the examples of what we could be doing, and not just here but all over the place, is could we make those communities and support those communities, to support the owner-occupied, capacity for people who live in there, who already own buildings, so that they're not falling victim to predatory speculation and are thus, really at the whims of the market the real estate market that will gentrify them out of their own communities, mm-hmm. that will not give them an opportunity to be a part of investing in there. We don't really have, this is nationwide, and I'm sure it's international at this point. In those low status communities where inequality is assumed, those are the people that aren't party to brain drain. Those are not the ones who are essentially benefiting from the development of their own communities. And so we need to make purchases of homes more accessible, through programs that are actually targeting folks that are in those communities, and we also need to support local business development and ways to get access to capital in the hands of folks in those communities first and foremost, because whether we're internally displaced or coming from more from outside of the country, we are not giving opportunities to folks within our own communities to be a part of reclaiming our own communities and being a part of reinvesting and restoring them and revitalizing them for our own sake.
Amen. So, Director General, when you hear that and think about the idea that, like you mentioned, a lot of migrants are coming to cities, and a lot of those, in those cities, they're coming to places where resource allocation is already sort of an issue, and resources have not been established. How do you sort of make it so that you have interventions so that people thrive in the cities when they show up? And also, how do you make it so that these aspects that people recognize that their community will benefit from the inclusion of people from other countries in different situations?
When we speak about integration, we are not speaking about creating a special status for migrants separate from the status of the host communities. Mm-hmm. We are speaking about taking stock of the needs and specific needs of migrants, definitely. That's why we try to profile the migrant communities in each local territory. But, and this is very important, the key question is to make the benefits to the migrants and to the host community on equal foot. This is for us extremely relevant. And we have quite a large experience in that respect. Because if you create the idea that there is a quote-unquote privileged status for migrants, you will just fuel the rejection towards migrants by the host communities. And what we do in this respect is to try to reconcile two main objectives. First, planning. There is a need of urban planning to cope with the arrivals of migrants. But we have to be humble and recognize that the migratory flows are rather unpredictable and they are fast-moving realities. They change very rapidly.
Which is the opposite of urban planning.
Exactly. So that's a challenge for the local authorities. How can we prepare our cities? How many children are you going to have in your schools in the next year? Just as simple as that. And we have seen, for instance, in a number of countries in Latin America, due to the situation in Venezuela, the huge displacement of Venezuelans in Colombia, in Ecuador, and in Peru have represented an extra pressure on social services. And from a certain moment onwards, the local communities, the host communities, started reacting to new arrivals. Why? Because before, they used to wait for a medical appointment 1 week, and then suddenly they had to wait 3 weeks. Okay? Because, of course, the public services were not prepared for such a major influx. This is the first challenge. The second challenge is to identify what are the tools that can be used to benefit both the host communities and the new arrivals. We have that experience in many countries in Africa. People return from failed migratory attempts, for instance. They need to be supported to reintegrate in their communities of origin. But we need to make sure that those benefits also extend to the host community. What we do, for instance, we create jobs that are both for the returnees and for the host community. So it's not just a question of creating a specific job sector for returnees. It's to say, if we launch an entrepreneurial initiative, we need to have closely associated returnees, so former migrants, and members of the host community. Because this is the best way of fostering social cohesion. And last but not least, this requires a dialogue. A dialogue with the local stakeholders. Local authorities are the best placed to lead that dialogue because they have the proximity that is required to run away from stereotypes, from anathemas, and to engage with real people on the basis of human interaction. And we are all humans.
How do you gather those stakeholders? Like, what is since this is sort of a conference of how versus just a conference of ideas, how do you begin to engage with communities in your work?
First of all, we count very much on local NGOs that have a key role to play in this respect. Secondly, which is more difficult, I do recognize, we try to support self-organization of the migrants themselves. It's easier when there is already a diaspora settled in the local area. And in some cases, like for instance, in Ukraine, you see now the refugees from Ukraine. The Ukrainian diaspora all over the world is extremely well organized, extremely efficient, and they have been extremely helpful to support the refugees after the invasion of Ukraine by the Russian Federation. So engaging with the migrants themselves, trying to self-organize them, and counting on the diaspora. And last but not least, there are a number of very simple things that can be used. For instance, art, music, cooking. Those are very daily things that can foster the intercultural dialogue, not in grand terms, not with big rhetoric, but having new experiences and changing those experiences. We have had that in many places in the world, and that's the best way of getting to the host communities. Starting with the heart and then getting to the brain.
Thank you. I want to talk a little bit about infrastructure, because I like to think about infrastructure. And infrastructure has been used to destroy neighborhoods. I mean, Robert Moses did his level best to destroy the Bronx.
Yes, he did. Tried. We're still here.
But how can a city's systems and infrastructure be used to support and lift up communities deemed low status and make things better to address historic inequities?
Yeah. So I'm going to take a different take, because I know that we're the physical infrastructure, water, sewage, things like that. The fact that highways were built through, that's what Robert Moses did, built a spaghetti network of highways. But I'm going to take a different take on infrastructure, and we're going to call it lifestyle infrastructure. And how can they be used to support low status communities? It's actually a nice segue between what Antonio just said and what I'm about to talk about, because commercial third spaces, like third spaces, for those of you who aren't like urban planning geeks, like us, it's basically a social space that's neither work nor home, but where you can build community. And it's like where literally community is not just a place, it's an activity, but you need places to do that, right? So, and what we notice in low status communities is that we're lacking many of them. Yeah. Like in my neighborhood up in the South Bronx, like literally one of the bigger social parts of real estate is literally the waiting rooms of health clinics and pharmacies. Not where you really want to be seen chilling in. I'm just saying. And there might be some community centers or some like not so well-meaning developer. I'm a developer, so I can say that.
You're the well-meaning kind.
But I'm a cool kind. But anywho, but they're the kind, like a community center, they build in the bottom of like some subsidized rental housing that they have to build in order to get like more stories built on the building. And nobody wants to be seen there either. So stuff like that. But commercial third places, the kind that make you feel cool, like whether they're cafes or bars or restaurants, the kind that we know people from our community leave in order to experience them, where they can actually feel good about being themselves, where they could like create the kind of memories and opportunities for them to share successes, where they could create contacts, they could meet their new boo, they could also like find a new job. I mean, it's all that. And when we don't have those kind of spaces in low status communities, guess what? We experience brain drain. Mm-hmm. The whether you're academically, socially, artistically, academically inclined, those are the first that are peeled off of our communities. And so the fact that if we can build lifestyle infrastructure, those things that we know people are leaving our community in order to experience them, and that we know that most developers, again, I'm the cool one, who decided, that we need to build the kind of infrastructure to literally keep folks in our own communities so that they can feel like they can reinvest in them. Not just financially, but socially and emotionally, to keep their money in the community, but also to keep their example of what is awesome about people from our own communities, because we've never had a shortage of awesomeness coming out of communities like ours. Like, I'm from the South Bronx, it's the birthplace of hip hop. You are welcome. And I'm just saying, and so all of that. But the thing is, like, we have a shortage of people staying and reinvesting. We fall victim to things like, predatory speculators telling us that our land has no value, and we believe them because we feel like there's nothing there. Yeah. And this is so having those third spaces where you get to see how fabulous people in your own community are, wherever they come from, so that you can see like the building of your own community, so that maybe you're not going to sell, your home to a predatory speculator who tells you that the value of your land is worth nothing, and then they go and gentrify the community for someone else. We have to look at those things as social systems and infrastructure to support the quality of life that leads to economic, social, and environmental resiliency in those neighborhoods. And I know it is not a real typical way to look at a city system, but the fact that we don't build those into low status communities mean that they are open and very vulnerable for every other kind of problem that happens, from environmental and certainly economic. And the fact that we lose our talent within our own community, that it literally goes to someone else's community to support it. What does that mean for the folks that are left behind? Mm-hmm. What does it mean for the people that are coming with the expectation that they're, we know that there's a concentration of poverty. We know that there's problems there, and yet we don't expect for those neighborhoods to ever change. That's why I became a developer, mm-hmm. because I'm like, no, we're going to create, no, we're going to support folks within our own communities to see themselves as the economic and social beauty that our community needs, but actually give them reasons to want to stay. So yeah, those commercial third spaces that remind people that they have something beautiful to offer, that's what I think we need more of.
Yeah. Amen. Well, we have like 2 minutes. My question in that regard then is, when you have development, it struck me that when you make things appealing, when you create those third spaces, when you have a vibrant immigrant community that creates amazing restaurants that you want to be in, it's like gentrification is like a tiger, and you like in the beginning you're like, oh, let's all pet the tiger. The tiger's great, and then like later on, everyone wants to move in, displace people, and then the tiger eats your face. How do you keep the tiger from eating your face?
Well, this is. I don't know anybody wants to pet that tiger, but the thing is, if folks were in a position where they understood the value of our own communities, yeah, gentrification would not even be a problem, because the bottom line is, people in those status communities, we like nice things too. Literally, that's why we go out of our neighborhoods to experience them. And we're putting money in somebody else's neighborhood, and there's no like living local circular economy. So I'm like, so we built a cafe in our community. I do like coffee and I like craft beer and all that stuff, but mostly it was to prove a point that if we had the kind of things that we know people leave, then it would give an opportunity for folks to see each other and want to stay. Mm-hmm. I even wrote a book about it called Reclaiming Your Community. You don't have to move out of your neighborhood to live in a better one. And it's about that talent retention approach to community development. Because again, if we build it for people in our communities and we know that it's there for us, and if we give people the opportunities to be a part of that, in particular the economic resurgence of our own community, help people see the value in it. I really feel like there's so many opportunities, from the fact that, like in the States, at least, I'm not blaming other places, if you're accused of a crime, you get a public defender to help support you. We don't have that in terms of real estate. Oh. We don't have, imagine if there's a public defender for real estate within this country. And because we know that how many folks have lost their homes because they just didn't understand how to keep them.
Yeah.
They just didn't know. But imagine if there was somebody actually helping people understand financing, just a little bit. And it doesn't take much to learn. This stuff is not rocket science. But if you're, again, told from your earliest days that your community is worthless, you're going to believe it when somebody says, I'm going to offer you some money for it. And that's because I don't believe gentrification starts when you start to see cute doggy or daycares and cute cafes in the neighborhoods. And I want to speak for the record, in the South Bronx, the first cute cafe and doggy daycare were actually done by, I did the cute cafe, the Boogie Down Grind, and my homeboy did Bronx Barks. He's Puerto Rican, second generation Puerto Rican. Thank you very much, and his Peruvian husband. So there you go. So we're from the hood, and we did it, and we like nice things too. But I do think that creating more opportunities like that, because again, it doesn't happen when you see those things. It happens when we believe that there's no value. Yeah. So when we know there's value and we're given opportunities and access to make that materialize, we're good.
Excellent. Well, we're already out of time. I could do this all day with both of you, but thank you so much, Antonio and Majora. Thank you for being here.
Thank you, guys.
Thanks for listening. So I have a slightly different role over here. This is why I'm standing on a podium at this moment. You know, the difference between this sort of gathering and other sort of ideas and you know, places where you hear people give brilliant talks is that there are commitments to action. And so today we have a couple of people that have committed to action, and we're going to bring them up and celebrate them and talk about their accomplishments. So could you please welcome Deirdre White and John Holm of PIXERA Global to the stage. Thank you. I'm going to go over there in a second, but I'm going to read some stuff about you while you stand there. While cities around the world represent 3% of global land surface, they disproportionately produce greenhouse gas emissions, consume resources, and are characterized by racial and economic inequity. Given these imbalances, cities must be targeted and supported as drivers of meaningful change. Moving from an extractive linear economy towards a regenerative circular economy represents an innovative and necessary approach to advancing progress. For instance, consumers who pay for a service rather than buying equipment, they keep the materials longer, and it motivates producers to make longer lasting products. And circular farming practices allow soils to rebuild and biodiversity to increase by returning biological materials to the earth. Today, in partnership with Enel North America, First Mile, Repley, and Repley, PIXERA Global and Metabolic are making a commitment to launch the Circular City Coalition to enhance economic, environmental, and social well-being by providing partner cities a regenerative and equitable platform designed to bring meaningful change in climate mitigation, waste management, and racial equity. This commitment will help cities identify key circular growth drivers, provide a funding pathway to invest in community-owned projects, enable donor funding to historically underinvested communities to mitigate pollution, improve economic mobility, provide entrepreneurial skills training, and work with local governments to advance policies that promote regenerative business models and economic mobility. The coalition will begin to work in the United States and has plans to scale in other cities in Latin America, Africa, and Europe. This commitment puts climate progress ahead of convenience, enables historically underinvested communities to be catalysts of change, and takes a fresh look at the root causes of waste to combat it there, not after it's produced. So thank you so much. I'm going to present you with a thing. All right. We have another commitment. Matt Peterson, will you come to the stage? Matt Peterson of Los Angeles Clean Tech Incubator. The transportation sector is the single largest source of greenhouse gas emissions, 27% in the United States, as well as the largest source of air pollution in most regions. The emissions are from burning fossil fuels, that are not just from cars, but also from vans and trucks that bring goods via e-commerce to our homes and businesses. The demand for e-commerce delivery has increased significantly in recent years, impacting local air pollution and traffic congestion with severe health, environmental justice, and quality of life consequences. Cities are on the front lines of these challenges and need help to pilot and scale solutions that reduce both emissions and congestion from the last mile delivery of goods. The Los Angeles Clean Tech Incubator, LACI, is making a commitment to replicate its zero emissions delivery zone model developed in the cities of Santa Monica and Los Angeles to an additional 5 to 7 additional U.S. metropolitan areas in 2025, by 2025, excuse me. The commitment and outcome of LACI's Transportation Electrification Partnership that includes Southern California Edison, LA DPW, BMW, Nissan, Audi, Electrify America, and others will partner with climate mayors to issue a call for interest to cities across the U.S. to create zero emissions delivery zone pilots in their communities. The selected cities will partner with LACI to design and implement such zone pilots that accelerate the use of electric trucks, e-cargo bikes, and other zero-emission technology solutions for last-mile deliveries that reduce air pollution, supporting the clean energy transition, and benefiting communities suffering from the worst environmental justice challenges. LACI's partnership with U.S. cities, startups, and companies will aim to develop inclusive green economies, spur innovation, create jobs, enhance overall community well-being, and decarbonize the American transportation sector. Thank you so much, Matt. Oh, now I'm over here. All right. And now for our next panel of guests. We're going to focus on this panel about refugee and internally displaced persons' economic integration. And so I'd like to welcome our panelists, Nazanin Ash, Jose Francisco Aguirre, and Jody Barnett to the stage. Oh, you're sitting. Do you have your microphone? There you go. There you go. Good. We're good to go. So Nazanin Ash is CEO of Welcome.us. Jose Francisco Aguirre is the executive director of the Santo Domingo Foundation, and Jody Barnett is the head of Global Cities at MasterCard. Thank you for joining us. So Jody Barnett, I'm going to start with you.
Sure. Hello. Hi, everybody.
In 2016, when CGI last took place, this was an inflection point for the engagement of the private sector on the global refugee crisis, with President Obama's call to action, the foundation of Tent, and other milestones. And since then, the way that the private sector engages in the resettlement and integration of refugees has evolved. How does MasterCard's blend of philanthropic and private sector interventions support the economic and financial inclusion of refugees?
Well, thank you for having us, and thank you for that question. I think it begins simply by saying that at MasterCard, we're very focused on creating inclusive and sustainable digital economies. That's at the forefront. And so because of that, we set aside 12% of our shares to create the MasterCard Foundation. And what that did is it created an organization that is one of the largest in the world today, of 30 billion in assets, to be able to help. And so in times like this, we're able to lean in either through the MasterCard Foundation or through donations made directly through MasterCard to help financially. And that's important because the work that has to happen on the front lines to make sure that the refugees, for example, in the Ukraine who are being displaced, have access to the relief services that they need. But what else? What else can you do? We do this really cool thing in the private sector where we work a lot on products and services, and we solve a lot of really complex challenges every single day. And we at MasterCard say, what if you took all of that work and all that effort and you turned it on its head and you said, I'm going to now apply those same sort of products and solutions, but to a crisis, to people who need it, changing up the target a little bit. And so again, if I think about the situation in the Ukraine, we took a program, we call it the Start Path Acceleration Program. And what that is the ability for startups to have access to all the wonderful things that in the private sector you often take for granted, knowledge, opening doors. Effectively, MasterCard becomes your team. And so we said, okay, startups, Ukrainian startups, let us help you get access to our program. Let us give you access to the things that you need in order to be successful. And we did more work. We did more work a lot around small businesses, right? And small business, we talked about it here this morning, and really small businesses being sort of the lifeblood of what's happening in communities. And so there's a ton of knowledge that we have there, again, as an entity that works very closely in the space. And so partnering with the Ministry of Digital Transformation in the Ukraine, we are able to set up a council so that SMEs are able to get access to the tools that they need and the thought leadership that they need to not just survive, but to thrive. And I think those are the moments where, you know, you're not only blending what you can provide from a financial assistance perspective, but you're extending the products and services of the things that you're already offering today, but in a very new way to ensure that people have access to a better day. And I think that is really the way in which we start to address part of the problem.
Yeah, thank you. Nazneen, I want you to describe Welcome.us, what it does, how it brings new people into the global struggle together. Could you start with that?
Sure. I'd love to start with that because it's been a really inspiring effort. I mean, we exist to inspire and enable and empower a broader range of Americans and American institutions to make their contribution to resettling newcomers in their new communities and ensuring that they thrive. And it's grounded in so much that we already heard this morning. Communities know best. Communities know how to make you feel included. You know, you need goods and services to start your new life, but you also need a new friend, a new neighbor, a new social network, someone to tell you, you know, where's the best place to take your kids on a Sunday afternoon, where's the best grocery store, and how do you navigate it, you know? And those are, and it's been really incredible to see how, you know, if you pose the question, you know, do you want to help? Do you want to help newcomers in your community? We haven't seen anyone say no yet, whether it's the CEOs on our CEO Council, you know, the 800 community partners that we're proud to, you know, count in the welcoming network, or everyday Americans who were searching for ways to plug in.
That's amazing. How does it, how do people know to join? How do you reach out? How do you make those connections happen?
So it's super interesting because we're a giant mobilization effort, right? So making sure that people know about the opportunities to assist. We're a center of gravity for everyone to learn where they can assist, including in their local communities. We raise funds, but we're also looking, and we distribute 100% of the funds that we raise for the Welcome Fund to community organizations on the front lines of doing the work. But we're really also indexed on direct participation. We know that direct participation with newcomers is as transformative for the welcomer as it is for the people that we welcome. We see that as the roots of being able to build resilience, tolerance, relationships, sustainability in our community so that we can welcome many more. And so we really focus on building those on-ramps where people can volunteer directly, where they can now, with the U.S. government's Uniting for Ukraine program, they can sponsor directly refugees to come here. For those of you who heard from Paulina this morning, she was sponsored by an American family, everyday Americans like everyone in this room. Mm-hmm. So, and we've partnered, you know, it was so great, Jody, to hear about the private sector bringing their innovations to bear. You know, it was a partnership with Goldman Sachs, ServiceNow, and Infosys that built a platform called Welcome Connect, where Americans can connect with Ukrainians seeking refuge and be able to be matched so that they can move ahead with sponsorship. Or we've relied on Amazon to bring their innovations to bear in what used to be a tremendous burden for resettlement agencies, where they were using expert staff, social workers and caseworkers, and spending a tremendous time of staff time and resources to source and sort and store and then distribute essential supplies and household goods for people who often arrive with nothing. Turns out Amazon knows how to do that pretty well.
Logistically, they've nailed it. Yeah.
So, you know, now it's this amazing last mile program where they're using their innovations. Everyday Americans can contribute. You can help purchase the goods that newcomer families need, but then Amazon will help deliver that on time to location, saving caseworker time, social worker time, doing some good in communities.
Yeah.
It's really
smart.
It's been amazing.
Jose Francisco. The latest reports say that 2.5 million Venezuelans are now in Colombia. The Santo Domingo Foundation is partnering with the mayor of Barranquilla that committed to, did their own commitment action for the local integration of Venezuelans, refugees and migrants in those communities. What is the foundation's role in this endeavor, and how are you engaging the Colombian private sector to do this work?
So thank you so much for the invitation. It's an honor being here with you today with such an amazing panel. First of all, I was reading my name and the name of the organization and the name of my country at the screen. That is one thing that we do very often, is that many people change the name of Colombia and they write Colombia.
Colombia, I see it.
We sell some T-shirts and hats, so that says, it's Colombia, not Colombia. And one of the things that happens, and I realized that during this week, is that we are talking about migration, and we are mainly focused on Syria, we are focused on Ukraine. All the funds are going to that countries. And what is happening right now in South America, it's something really impressive and very dangerous for our democracy, for our social stability, and for the education system. Somebody was talking about urban planning and also the pressure that we have right now in the social services at Colombia. And you said that 2.5 million Venezuelans are right now in Colombia because of the displacement that we have been having in the last 3 or 4 years. And it increased during the pandemic. Around 6 million Venezuelans go to Colombia, Peru, and Ecuador, and it is a huge migration crisis. What do we do, or what are the challenges that we have? The Santo Domingo Foundation is a 62 years old foundation founded in Barranquilla, Colombia, at the Caribbean coast, and we work mainly in the Caribbean coast of Colombia, not only in Barranquilla, but also in Cartagena. And what we are doing right now is that we are building 2 cities into the cities. It's a large-scale program of building houses, schools, parks, healthcare institutions. And for example, in this partnership with Barranquilla, with the mayor of Barranquilla, what we are trying to do is to include migrants in a great scale so that they can get into the system very fast. It is very difficult because there is a lot of people coming to the coast of Colombia. Mm-hmm. And the challenge that we have right now is not only building the houses, improving the systems of education and healthcare, but the barriers that we have, because that is a lot of people coming and the system has a lot of pressure. So what we're doing right now is building programs with many entities and allies to build the process of inclusion together with the private and the public sector in Colombia. It's a huge challenge, but I believe that the openness of the government of Colombia during the last 4 years it has been an example of what a country has to do in order to include migrants on the systems. Mm-hmm. My objective right now is that to increase the awareness about what is happening in South America. It's a huge migration crisis, and I believe that we have to talk about that very loud to the world.
Yeah. Well, tell me more about it. So you mentioned that these sort of Caribbean coast towns or cities are getting the most migrants. This is the moment where how do you deal with the concentration in certain areas? It's not, if migration was spread out equally, there would be no problem. In a way, it's all like it concentrated on certain efforts to strain certain resources. How do you manage that? How do you deal with that when that many people come to a small place all at once?
Something that happens that is impressive is that Barranquilla, it's a city that was built with migrants during the Second War of the world. A lot of people come from around the world, so it's a city that is built from many cultures. And the people from Venezuela and the people from the Caribbean coast like the same. That's very pure allied. So one of the things that is happening right now is that we are working very close with the communities, because there is not only Venezuelans coming to Colombia. 20 years ago or 30 years ago, a lot of Colombians go to Venezuela because that was the country of opportunities at that time in South America. So what we are experiencing is that a lot of Colombians that used to live in Venezuela and get married with people from Venezuela and build families that are like the same, Colombian and Venezuelan, they are coming back to the country. And we experience something impressive, is that not only the local governments, but also the people and the communities around the Caribbean coast and around the country are very open to like open the houses, the doors, and the communities in order to give them a good experience around just this difficult moment that you need to get out of your country just because you don't have any opportunities.
Yeah.
And one of the things that we are trying to do, building these partnerships between companies and governments, is to give opportunities for the people. First, to have some place to go, then to understand what to do with the services for the families, and third, and very important, is to build economic opportunities in order to give them financial inclusion, employment, and all that we need in order to be an example for this migration crisis and show the world that Colombia, Venezuela, and the region, we can build something around this huge crisis and try to see it like an opportunity for the region.
Yeah, yeah. So with MasterCard, they're trying to use the power of a technology to like make services and financial support more accessible to people. How can those tools be used to support financial and economic integration of refugees and displaced people?
So I'm just going to build on a lot of what's already been said here today,
Please.
but I also love the term economic integration.
Yes.
Because it starts to really frame the issue. And how do we start to develop things that will help us further economic integration? And you know, I think we recognize that in order to create a vibrant economy, whether you're a refugee or whether you've been displaced even by poverty, you know, the reality is that you need access to certain financial services, and you need to have vibrant communities that support the development and the desire to continue to create and to develop human capital within those areas. And so again, just sort of thinking about an example of some of the work that we've done to be specific about it, you know, we've created a partnership for Central America, which a little more north, but certainly focused on, you know, 3 of the poorest countries in our Western Hemisphere, right? And, you know, El Salvador, Guatemala, Honduras. And the goal there is really to do a couple of things. One is to make sure that we're starting to introduce sort of a more formal approach to financial services. Today, it is very, very, very much sort of broken up and sort of cash dependent. And so how do you introduce that into the community? And again, how do you increase human capital? And there's really sort of 3 ideas here. And one is around how do you start to really build financial inclusion? And we're doing that by working with small businesses and making sure that we're digitizing them. Our commitment to digitize over 1 million small businesses within the area. And in addition to that, ensuring that we have access to financial literacy materials. So far, we've offered over 7 million people the ability to understand, how do you open a bank account? How do you open a savings? How do you save? How do you apply for a loan? These are basic things that, you know, we sort of take for granted, but aren't necessarily readily available. And again, just sort of thinking about some of the things that we're already offering at MasterCard today, we have a fantastic program called Girls for Tech. And again, you know, thinking about the human capital idea, It's the ability for these young girls to now start to learn STEM programming, which is all around the context of how you can help create a payment system. And I think that, the notion of giving back to the community in this way is really what really helps to drive that inclusion that we're talking about. Even a little closer to home, if I think about, some of the ways in which poverty has displaced folks during the pandemic, and our ability to sort of lean in on that issue, and pointing to some of the work that we did in LA with the Mayor's Fund and working with great financial partners like Mocafy, who understand that this moment where you're handing somebody a tool to be able to now participate in the digital economy, whereas before they have never had access to it. It's a moment. It can be a life-changing moment if you provide the right services, the right education, and create the right comfort in order for folks to know that this is a tool to help me move forward. And so, that program alone, is helping over 104,000 families, which is incredibly impactful. So, the answer to the question around how do you make sure that you are creating that inclusion is just ensuring that we, again, are reaching out and providing those services in areas that, perhaps don't always come top of mind, but make such a tremendous impact in changing the lives and frankly, creating a better day for these individuals.
Yeah. This idea of a moment, that there's some opportunity here to focus impact investing, to build infrastructure for new communities coming into a place and also benefiting the people that are already there. Jose Francisco, could you talk a little bit about how the Santo Domingo Foundation can contribute to impact investing models that will ultimately benefit migrants, refugees, and sort of the native community that's there?
Our impact investing approach, in order to include all these population, these people that are excluded from the system, not only migrants, it's around housing. We have this macro project of housing in Cartagena and Barranquilla. What are we trying to do there is like people have the opportunity to live in a 20-minute city where you can find your house, the parks, the schools, the early childhood places, the university, all the service that a family needs. They are new cities. And what we are doing right now is partnering with the government on a national level and in a local level, and with developers so that they invest in the housing programs, and we have other investors that invest in the infrastructures that we have, and we have long-term contracts with other entities and with the public entities in order to operate the educational system, also schools and universities, but also in the healthcare, so that we can allocate and invest capital from impact investing funds and developers in order not only to build the urban assets and the houses, but also the infrastructure that the people need. Because one of the things that we realize is that all these housing projects that are usually built around South America are excluded from the opportunities in the surrounding of the cities. So what we are trying to build is that building these cities into the cities and build this 20-minute
Like 20-minute
approach.
walking or like...
Walking.
Yeah.
Walking.
Yeah.
Where you can find everything.
Exactly.
That changed the life of the people. And for migrants, the barriers are getting low because the financial system are trying to get them financial inclusion at the beginning when they are arriving. So with the registration and the capacity to demonstrate that they have some income or debt, or they have like some track record in the financial system, there is a lot of opportunities to give them better possibilities in this kind of approach of these new buildings, the new cities into the cities.
I mean, this is what Nazanin was mentioning, this idea, like, the city is probably our greatest technology that we've ever created, and we know how to do a city better. And it is not a sprawling city. It's a 20-minute walkable city. And so that knowing that is kind of like giving Amazon the last mile problem. You know, like
And the thing is that it's difficult to build sustainable cities for low-income communities. And the traditional approach is that you invest in housing, you sell them or give them the house, but you don't approach it like a city with all the services that they need.
yeah.
And the huge challenge, and what we are trying to demonstrate, and we are investing our endowment in these projects, is that you can invest and be sustainable and have some profit after 20 years of investing in this project. It's a long-term investing, but it's sustainable, and we are demonstrating that.
Nazanin, yes, please.
I think that's one of the amazing things about letting cities lead, right? So, like Mayor Adams was saying, with his incredible remarks at the start of this session, cities know what they need, and they know how much they rely on and benefit from the energy and contributions of newcomers. So, even in these last, 6 years, where we've seen like tremendous toxicity at the national level of our politics with respect to immigrants and refugees, citizens, state and local leaders have been innovating on inclusive practices that allow immigrants and newcomers to make their economic contributions as quickly as possible, make their social contributions as quickly as possible. So, you had a situation where state and local leaders were moving literally in the opposite direction of our national politics, where, at the outset of, 2015, 2016, when you had national efforts to shut the doors to refugees, you had state and local efforts that were about codifying refugee resettlement, that were about finding ways to incorporate the foreign certifications in healthcare and other skills that newcomers bring at a faster rate, that were about allowing newcomers to access in-state tuition, for example, on a faster time frame, that were about expanding, to points that Jose has made, expanding traditional social services that are made available to low-income communities and extending that to newcomers because it was a faster way to access their contributions. And, we've seen, it was Oklahoma that with the arrival of Afghan newcomers, innovated in providing a housing subsidy to attract them to the state. The state of Vermont appropriated $2 million, a program that's about recruiting newcomers to the state. And that's what I mean by it, like operating on a really different level than our national politics. And allowing communities and cities to lead the way, not just on the solutions, but also on the inclusivity, on the culture that we're rebuilding, is cause for hope.
It is, and I think that's the whole point of this panel and this session in particular, is that when you center things around cities and human-to-human interactions, we solve these problems better. And so I'm really glad that you guys were here to talk about it, and everyone in the previous panels, and thank you so much for being here. We're going to get set up. There's one more panel to go. Do not leave yet. We have one more panel. Risa Barron, would you come up and start?
Thank you, Roman. Is it on? Welcome, everyone. So this is the last portion of this session called the Fireside Chat. I know it doesn't feel like we should be lighting a fire at this time of year. Thank you. So I'm very excited to welcome our wonderful 2 panelists up to the stage. First, Frank Scott Jr., the mayor of Little Rock, Arkansas. Mayor Scott is also the president of the African American Mayors Association. And second up, we are thrilled to have Catherine Luger, the CEO of the American Beverage Association. Thank you both for being here. I know that this is all, the spirit of CGI is all about partnership and collaboration, and I know that the two of you definitely epitomize that. So I just want to dive in. And Catherine, we know that nutrition access, affordability, and education are at the root of health disparities throughout this entire country. Yesterday, the American Beverage Association Foundation for a Healthy America and the African American Mayors Association announced a new partnership to address some of those gaps and disparities. If you could tell us a little bit more about how this partnership came about, what are the history of this partnership, and kind of what are some of the goals that you all are looking to achieve through this partnership?
Absolutely, and thank you, Risa, and it's an honor to be here with you, Mayor Scott. And thank you all. This has been a terrific conversation today. So, listen, I'm going to come back to the specifics of our new partnership with the African American Mayors Association, which we're really excited about, because it's going to help, we believe, to address the issue of health disparities, and specifically around nutrition, access, and education. But I think before I get into that, a couple of important foundational points I think that will help to bring that partnership to life. Number one, America's beverage companies like Coca-Cola, Pepsi, Keurig Dr. Pepper, our products are almost 100% made and brought to market with American jobs and American communities. That means that our partnership, right, with mayors and communities is central to who we are. It is deep-rooted. It has always been that way. That's number one. Number two, we believe that the best and most innovative solutions and partnerships often come out of America's mayors, right, and out of our community partners. And number three, and this is really important because it was here at the Clinton Global Initiative 8 years ago that our industry stood up and said, you know, we've got to do more to get sugar out of Americans' diet. We can take responsibility for what we can take responsibility for. And so we said, and we set a lofty goal. We've heard a lot of great goals today. Our goal and our commitment was to take 20% of the sugar and calories per person out of what people are consuming from beverages. So here's the exciting thing. We are halfway to our partnership. We are halfway to our goal. We are now down about 10%. And we're on pace to hit that goal by 2025. Here's the more exciting part of this. We actually decided to really intentionally begin to work with local partners in a handful of local communities where health disparities were the greatest, where we had higher rates of obesity than the national average. And so we decided to go work in those communities with local partners in a very intentional way to understand how to affect change. Here in New York, we actually worked in the Bronx. We are down 18.9%. In Mayor Scott's town of Little Rock, we're ahead of the national average, down about 11.5%. In East LA, again, these are not easy markets. In East LA, we actually now have exceeded our goal of about 20 and are down 21%. Okay, let me go to the final point, and then I'm going to go to Amma because this all builds together. Here we go. How are we doing that, right? It takes, number one, a national strategy. It takes fierce competitors who, by the way, are trying to eat each other's lunch in the marketplace every day. But it takes them being intentional on setting a goal. They decided they would use their power of innovation to bring more choices with less sugar to market. So think about how different a lot of your grocery store aisles look today, and your beverage aisles specifically. You see sparkling flavored waters. You see zero-calorie sports drinks. You see vitamin waters. You see zero-sugar teas, more zero-sugar soft drinks. That was intentional. 60% of now what we're selling today has no sugar at all. All right, how do we bring that now to market? This is where Amma comes in. Do we have your attention? Here we go. It only works if we have a community strategy. We can do all the innovation in the world, but unless we are bringing it to life in communities, finding the right trusted partners, getting folks to say, yes, they're going to try this, it will never work. So with Amma, we announced yesterday $500,000 in grants to go to large, medium, and small city mayors. We know that 1/3 of our cities are represented by African American mayors. And we know that we have a lot of work to do when it comes to addressing health disparities. And at the root of that is nutrition access education, and affordability. This is one small part of a bigger strategy. And frankly, we have a lot of work ahead of us. We don't sit here today and think we've gotten the job done. We've got a lot of work to do. We are deeply committed. And standing with you, Mayor, in the spring when we announce our first grant recipients is going to be a real honor to see this partnership come to life. So thank you for your leadership.
Thank you, Catherine.
Thank you.
Mayor, it's wonderful to hear, how committed you all are and what was the, impetus behind this partnership. Could you tell us a little bit about why this is appealing to you and your fellow mayors and why collaborations with Catherine and organizations like hers are so important and why you all said yes?
Well, I think as Catherine's already shared the foundational context of what we've heard today is intentionality, innovation, but most importantly, inclusion. And so for many years, myself and other mayors like Mayor Byron Brown in Buffalo, who's here with us today, and Mayor Eric Adams, we attend the U.S. Conference of Mayors Conference, and there's so many different organizations that are sponsoring. But honestly, many times mayors who represent not only a third of the United States, but also a third of the United States GDP, we felt left out when it comes to organizations. And so the ABA has stood up and said, hey, we're going to be more inclusive, not just the U.S. Conference of Mayors, but the Black Mayors Association. Understand that we do have a purse to the power as it relates to the GDP and the number of cities that we represent, which are really the top 5, top 10 cities in the United States when you really think about that, and close to 500 plus mayors, large, medium, and small across the nation. And so with that inclusion, what you see now is a better opportunity because many of the individuals that are really plagued with a lot of the healthcare disparities are what? Black. And so when you understand the healthcare disparities that have been amassed as it relates to COVID-19, it's really created not only an intentional, innovative, but an inclusion-oriented model that we're working together. We're happy to have this new model. It comes under the leadership of Catherine because she gets it when it comes to equity. Many times, many people want to confuse equity with equality, and it has nothing to do with it at all. And many times, it's not just solely black or brown, it's a lack of resources. And really, when you understand that the lack of resources, you put pen to pencil, and you get this partnership that we have here today. So very grateful to Catherine, her intentionality and innovation with the ABA.
Just to follow up on what you were saying about COVID-19, so we know the last 2.5 years have shed some light on a lot of serious issues. Like we, in our organization, work with teens and health education, right? We knew that there was a mental health issue way before, but now we're talking about it, right? In light of COVID-19 and the aftermath. So we know that these inequities are now, coming to light more because of COVID-19, especially in the African-American community. And these are things that I'm sure you've been seeing the struggles for years. So Little Rock has a 40% African-American population. How did your city's experience with COVID-19 influence your participation in this partnership with Catherine? And how do you plan to deploy these resources into the community? So how does this really kind of, compel you to do this work? Why is it so critical and urgent?
Sure, as the city's first elected black mayor, who represents an entire city, so I'm clearly the mayor of the entire city and it happens to be black. But I do come with a set of unique perspectives as we come. And I can tell you, on January 1st, 2019, when I was elected, did not expect to lead through a global pandemic, nor did I expect to lead through a summer of George Floyd that eerily reminds us of the summer of the 1960s. I say that we, black mayors, we, any kind of mayor across the United States, we're living history right now. There hasn't been a pandemic since 1918. Many of us were not alive during the summer of the 1960s. And so when you understand what's going before us, you have to pay very attention to your municipal leaders. Yes, we're all excited about congressional members and we're excited about the president, but guess what happens? When the rubber hit the road, when COVID-19 happened, who was at the front of the helm? It was many times you saw mayors going against governors. And so when you figure this out as it relates to COVID-19, COVID-19 unmasked healthcare disparities. It unleashed trauma that had been capsized in for quite some time, and we really understood mental health. And so we're very proud here in Little Rock. One of the things that we implemented was a community schools model with 4 schools right now. Each had a need-based assessment, and part of that community schools model, one of our schools has a school mental health center as well as school-based health care. Because of that, we've now understood how this learning loss of the past 2 years has impacted mental health, has it impacted social services, and one of the things, the reason why many of our other cities within the state of Arkansas are now focused on a community schools model. I say that all to say is that COVID-19 has really helped municipal leaders who normally normally, we focus on, as my grandfather say, your job is to pick up the trash, catch the robbers, and put out the fires. Anything else you do is because you love the people. However, now we have to add to that context is healthcare. Because healthcare sustains education and economic development. And so that's why we've gone all in with our partnership with the Little Rock School District, with our community health assessments, with our community schools model, and focusing on school-based mental health.
Thank you, thank you. Catherine, so inclusion is all about equitable access and full participation, and it'll take collective action across sectors to close the gaps that we're discussing here today, for good nutrition especially. What kinds of groups and organizations are also needed, in addition to your organization, which has already stepped up, to make the best of this partnership? Like, how can the CGI community and the stakeholders that are here and other organizations follow your lead? Who are you looking for, and why should they get on board?
So it's a great question, but I first have to take a moment and I think we all owe the mayor a round of applause for everything that did happen during the pandemic. You guys are often the unsung heroes, working along unsung heroes in your communities. And I'm going off script for a moment for an important reason.
You're allowed.
My father-in-law started a long, esteemed career in public service as the mayor of Indianapolis. He served in the United States Senate for 36 years, had to run for president and a few other things. Here's the thing he used to always tell me. It starts and ends with mayors. He didn't sit there and tell my kids stories about his time in the United States Senate. He talked about his time as being mayor of Indianapolis because of what Mayor Scott said and how you all led during the pandemic was just unbelievable to watch. Okay, to your question, because it's a great one. It is what, frankly, CGI is all about. And I touched on this in my last comment. We may, as an industry, have a national strategy, but we can't get it done without local partners, right? I spoke a little bit about some of the communities we focused on in order to really try to drive a healthier set of products, bring them to market, and get consumers to take us up on them. So in East LA, where again we've exceeded our goal to date several years early, we actually got to work with a local partner called Barrio. What they did is they took their health ambassadors, they sent them out into the community. People have deep-seated roots in what they like. It's hard to change consumers, right? Often you go for the same beverage time and time again. So what they began to do is go out to the local bodegas and local small grocery stores and small convenience stores, and those local ambassadors talk to them about why they should take a risk in putting some of these newer, healthier products on the shelves, and that, yes, we would also work to be trying to get consumers to take us up on them. And that strategy worked. We couldn't have gotten it done without that organization. Let's go to your community, and actually it's a gentleman who's here at this event, Derek Lewis, and work that he has been doing with youth to try to educate them on making better choices and good choices around nutrition, because they know that when they get kids to follow and make good choices around nutrition, not only does that lead them to living a healthier life, they take those choices, decisions, and influence back home to their families, right? And their families also begin to lead healthier lives. They have been such foundational and important partners to us in Little Rock, and again, helping to implement strategies that are really, really important to us, but at the local level. So why CGI? This is exactly what I just described. It's an ability for us all to come together on a global stage, right? But also with local partners to try to make a difference, to try to make change, and to try to address these problems that I think we're all really serious about solving. And so for that, I want to say thanks to the CGI leadership, thanks to you, Risa, and of course, thanks to you, Mayor Scott.
Thank you, Catherine. So just to follow up on what you were saying, which was the next point that we were going to cover, education and outreach. You already touched upon, getting young people involved. So equity and inclusion, falls underneath that. This is a topic that's close to my heart because I run an organization based out of Miami. We train 11th and 12th grade high school students to teach a comprehensive health education program to all 9th graders at their school. And we do cover things like nutrition. Exactly what you said is that they follow the lead and they do bring that information back to their families, right? It's crucial, right? And it's also crucial to get the school partners involved. So to you, Mayor, how do you feel that, Catherine kind of touched upon the importance of getting young people involved in this movement and in education. What do you see their role in Little Rock and in your schools in, working and supporting this particular collaboration?
Well, I think it doesn't happen without our youth and our young adults. I think many times they're left out of, and I say we're left out, I'm a millennial mayor, left out of that conversation. And here's the thing, there's new opportunities, there's new perspective to age-old problems. And so many times those who are hit hardest are never the ones who are being talked to. Things are being done to them.
Right.
And so I think when you have this type of collaboration with an organization like ABA, is one, we have to go to the closest to the issue. And that's our youth and our young adults. And many times our youth and our young adults do not control who their parents are, do not control who their surroundings are. And so it's up to us as government and philanthropic organizations to figure out how do we create this safety net for them, but not only a safety net, how do we create an exit system, exiting certain mentalities that may have been brought up that we can kind of cure to ensure that there's a lifelong prosperity from a healthcare standpoint. So it starts first with them.
Absolutely. So we are unfortunately out of time. I thank you all for participating and supporting this wonderful panel. Thank you to Catherine. Thank you to Mayor Scott. And we hope that this is just the beginning of more conversations around these important issues and future collaboration. So thank you to you both.